So, Dave, I've come up with a disturbing realization about myself. I'm going to miss quarantine.
Miss quarantine. Yes, I can see that. Yep.
I'm going to really miss quarantine. Has been, for me, fantastic. And I'll tell you why. I realized it's March now. We're living in precedented times. And I've realized for an entire year, I haven't had to go anywhere. Right. And it's been glorious. It's been wonderful. I haven't had to go to restaurants and deal with people in restaurants. I haven't had to travel anywhere. I mean, some of that has been sad. I would have liked to have seen my parents in Michigan this past summer, but a lot of it has been stuff that I really didn't mind not doing. And it's been, my wife said, next weekend, we're thinking about doing because we haven't gotten our shots yet, but we're going to do like a socially distanced porch party with a couple of people. And I'm like, really? Already? She says, already? It's been a year. And I'm like, well, yeah, I just didn't know we were going to go rushing into this. But there's been
can we give this a 6 to 9 month wait period?
let's ease into it, you know?
Yeah.
But but all kidding aside, and I'm not kidding that much, but there's been some real positives. For example, our food choices have gotten so much better because during those first several weeks and months of lockdown, we had to figure out how we were going to do food. And what happened? A few real interesting things happened. First of all, there's a seafood distributor that did not want to obviously go out of business, and it didn't want to lay off their drivers. So they would typically distribute seafood to restaurants. Well, they opened up to the public, so you could get restaurant quality seafood.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Yeah.
Discounted. Our seafood has gotten so good because Carolyn's getting amazing shrimp and scallops and all of this other stuff, crab cakes. Restaurant quality, but we're not paying restaurant prices. That's been better.
Oh my God! I love how the key part is restaurant quality, but not restaurant prices. Right. Hi, come on down to Brad Geiger's living room where you'll get crab cakes at 30% off.
Yes, and because that they want to keep these drivers busy, they'll drive around the neighborhoods and stuff. So it makes a lot of sense.
Right.
We've been doing of course Reading Terminal Market, which if you've ever been to Philadelphia for a comic convention, right across the street from the convention center. Reading Terminal Market has a bunch of these like Amish stands and butchers and all kinds of stuff there. Well, they were also kind of getting together because they were losing all that foot traffic. All of a sudden, she's getting stuff. She's getting baked goods from the Amish. She's getting really good cuts of meat from different butchers and stuff. We've never eaten so good as we have during this past year. And I told Carolyn, we're not going back. We're not going back to buy those measly steaks at the grocery store. We're going to keep eating like this. This has been and we wouldn't have necessarily been motivated to try some of that stuff unless we were like, okay, let's work some of this stuff out. And Carolyn is amazing at doing that kind of stuff. Like she's really top notch. But our food choices have gone through the roof.
I love how, like, Brad, how was your quarantine? And your response is like your job of reaching for the green frog going, like it all comes back to the meal that you've had in quarantine.
Yeah. We've eaten great. I've been well fed. I haven't had to go anywhere. I go to my studio and I come home. It's been a great year.
Well, I got to tell you, for 10 of the 12 months or so, I would have agreed with you that I am super introspective, and it's not an accident that I picked a career where I can largely be in a room by myself. Like, I had other options. I can be sociable when I want to. I didn't choose that. I chose to be in a room by myself. But I will say that the depression kicked in for me about a month ago, and I've had a couple weeks of real malaise of missing people and missing the world. I think I have reached my breaking point. You know, it took 10, 11 months, and then finally I was like, no, you know what? I need a little bit more than the same 3 rooms kind of a thing. And so I'm ready for it. Now, that being said, I also enjoyed the fact that like I raised 30, 40 pounds of tomatoes that I wouldn't normally have done. I built pieces of furniture. I've refinished a lot of our furniture over this quarantine. So I've done stuff that I hadn't. And like you, God, I tell you what I don't miss. I don't miss having to go to Hollywood events that I never enjoyed.
Yeah.
I don't get me wrong. I love the catering. The catering is always top notch, and I'm the only cartoonist there. So like, if it's some creme brulee thing drizzled over a donut, I'm the only guy going, "No, I'll have 6 more of these, please." And
like, you don't have a lot of competition for that from the actors and the actresses, right?
Yeah, it's not like Angelina Jolie's nudging me out of the way to get that creme brulee donut. I'm the only one eating it. But so I do miss the food, but I don't miss having to put on a suit. Oh my God.
Yeah.
The poor belt that's going to have to hold me into the suit the first time that I put that thing back on again. That's going to be doing the Lord's work, that belt.
They're going to have to strap you into that suit.
Because that's another thing about this quarantine that hasn't happened to me in a long time. Good God, has my weight seesawed. When the pandemic first hit, I literally had an anxiety weight loss of like 25, 30 pounds. I literally lost a ton of weight just out of anxiety. And then I think what happened is I got kind of used to it. You can get used to anything in life, and I got kind of used to the idea of a pandemic. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll just have a little ice cream. That'll be nice. And then back went the 30 pounds. And then I was like, no, I need to turn this around. Back down went the 30 pounds. It has been like a magic mountain ride over this pandemic, weight-wise.
Oh my gosh, 30! Are you serious? 30 pounds is a lot to fluctuate by.
Oh yeah, and the first time that I lost weight, it was over the course of like 4 weeks. It was like a dangerous amount of weight loss that quickly. Yeah. The onset of the pandemic really triggered anxiety in me because I think I was following it better than most people. So I was following it in February, and I was like, this is spreading in Wuhan far too fast. And I kind of saw where it was going. Anyway, but I lost way too much weight at first, and it was not a healthy weight loss. It was like 6 pounds a week kind of a thing. It's not good. Anyway, what a fun topic! What a fun way to open the show.
Glad to have you back at your fighting weight.
Oh, it's my fight weight. I'll fight you from the couch, like leaning Roman style on one elbow. And on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics
and making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's hour of comics advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend, and let's give a huge shout out to our sponsor for this week, the good folks at Bonjoro.com, BONJORO.com. As a reminder, you can right now go over and try Bonjoro for 14 days. It is as you remember, it's a greeting and outreach platform that lets you, whenever someone buys something from your store, joins your Patreon, gets some original art from you, it automatically pops up on your phone saying, hey, send them a quick Bonjoro. You hit record, boop, you record a 30-second greeting, and honest to God, the results are amazing. People really appreciate that personal outreach from the cartoonists that they love. So when you try that 14-day trial, if you're loving it, and we think you will, you can use ComicLab April, all one word, in the coupon field to get 20% off your entire life.
Oh, and by the way, you're going to want to sign up after 14 days because what we've found personally, as both of us have used this app, is that the response you get when you look at that video camera in the eye, so to speak, and you speak the name of the person that just became a Patreon backer, for example, the response is amazing. And we've gotten so many. Dave, I just pulled up one out of the several that we've shared back and forth. This was from ComicLab. This was from Matt, who became a ComicLab backer. Dave sent him a Bonjoro, and then Matt wrote back, I've been mainlining ComicLab, so I heard the Bonjoro episodes, and this video still managed to surprise and delight me. I'll return to my comic with a goofy-ass grin on my face. Take care. That's the kind of stuff that you hear back. I mean, it's and Dave, you've gotten, like for Sheldon and so forth, you've gotten responses from Bonjoro videos that went paragraph after paragraph.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. It literally just takes you seconds to record and send one of these things because 90% of the work is automated for you. You turn
Yeah.
around, you go, boop, hi, Greg. Oh my God, I saw you join the Drive Patreon. And the thing that I have noticed repeatedly, not once or twice, but repeatedly, for a 20 to 30 second video that is incredibly sincere and is said with all heart, but only took me 20, 30 seconds, I will get back paragraphs, Brad, paragraphs of an email. Dave, oh my God, I can't believe you took the time to send that. This is amazing. I've been reading Sheldon for 15 years. And also, you need to know that my mom, when she was in trouble, Sheldon helped lift her up and this and that, bing, bang, bing, bang, bing. Basically, it was permission to unleash the fandom gates. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that can do nothing but help that relationship between artist and audience over time. So do check out Bonjoro, BONJORO.com for the 14-day trial. And remember, ComicLab April as your coupon to get 20% off your entire life.
Absolutely. So, Dave, I've got an opening topic that this is something that came up recently that I think is kind of fascinating. And I think everybody who's been in comics has a story or even multiple stories like this. So here's the question. Who were the cartoonists who wrote you a roadmap for your career? In other words, who are the cartoonists that when a young Dave Kellett was just finding his sea legs in the early 2000s, who were you looking to? Who was providing, whether they knew it or not, who was providing a map for you to follow as you built out your career?
Well, this is a great question. We've talked in the past about how when I was a kid, Bill Watterson, Burke Breathed, Gary Larson with The Far Side taught me, or not only taught me, but gave me the spark of wanting to be a cartoonist, right? And that they were the spark for art. But I think this is an interesting question because the idea of a roadmap is different. It's how to start and plan and project your career by looking at the roadmap that they themselves have used in their career. And for that, I think I have about 4 or 5 different names that would pop into mind. And I'll be honest, in the switch from thinking, I'm going to be a newspaper cartoonist to I'm going to be an independent cartoonist working online, the big switch for me was looking at cartoonists like Scott Kurtz, who was probably a year or 2 or 3 ahead of us in terms of what he was doing. And then, frankly, as I came to know the three of you, Brad Geiger, Chris Straub, and Scott Kurtz together, it was just a wonderful sharing and back and forth of best practices that frankly extended out to also, I'll include other people, Rich Stevens, in terms of how to monetize a career, was really instrumental for me in those early years. And a somewhat surprising one, Jeff Smith with Bone, who gave me an overarching sort of philosophy that I did not have in my teens and 20s about how to be a cartoonist, which was make your own magic. You know, remember he drove around the Midwest selling Bone out of the trunk of his car to comic book shops, right?
Yeah.
And then he would successfully repackage and resell the same thing. The advice that we give to people, draw it once, get paid for it multiple ways. He has been paid multiple ways for pages that he drew 30 years ago with Bone, you know? Paid for as a floppy, paid for as a trade, paid for as a collected trade, you know, those bigger ones, paid for as a recolored Bone, and now as a repackaged Bone. And he has been, for me, instrumental as a cartoonist that I look to in terms of how to structure your career and design your own to follow. How about you? What are the cartoonists that gave you a roadmap?
We've got a little crossover in that when I was making up my list, Scott Kurtz was one of the first that came to mind too, because he jumped way out in front, way early. And he was somebody that I continually, even before I met him personally, I was always looking at what he was doing and how he was doing it and really trying to see what I could learn there. Right. But even beyond that, one of the most formative conversations I ever had was with Phil Folio. And as I've said in the past, Phil is an excellent cartoonist, and the project he works on with Kaja, his wife, Girl Genius, is kind of almost required reading at this point in comics. But before he did that, he did a not safe for work comic called Xenophile with 3 X's, of course. Back when I was first tentatively thinking about doing not safe for work comics, it happened that we were both in New York for the New York Comic Con at the time. Mm-hmm. And I pulled him aside and I said, Phil, I'm thinking about doing this thing. If you don't have any plans for dinner, I'd love to take you out to dinner and just pick your brain and really find out if I really understand what I'm getting into, what I can learn, how I should be positioning myself, and all of that stuff. And of course, he kindly agreed. And we went to this little Indian restaurant, and for some reason, we had gotten there at an odd time, so there wasn't a whole lot of people around yet. It was just basically him and I, as I remember it, had the run of the joint. And we sat there and ate, and I asked him all of my questions, and he gave me all of, assurances and reassurances and kind of told me, some things that I could expect. We talked about the philosophy, because the thing about Phil's work in Not Safe for Work and adult content is that when I read his stuff, it was the first time that I really realized that adult content could be fun. It could be happy. It could be science fiction. It could be exciting. And it could be all these things that I never experienced before in that kind of realm. And I'm like, you could do really happy, joyful comics that are not safe for work. And so I wanted to hear all about what he had to say about his philosophy of where he was coming from when he wrote some of this stuff. When I left that table, when we were going back to the hotel, I knew that that was when I officially mentally started down this pathway that I've been following for years since.
Right.
And it was really because of Phil, not only showing me how it could be done in these comics that he had done before he and I had ever met, but also in the time that he took with me over dinner and talked with me. By the time I was done, I was on my way, and it was thanks to Phil.
That's fantastic. Can I ask you a quick question? Because I don't know if you noticed that this happened. I mentioned one of the cartoonists that had made a roadblock, or not a roadblock, a roadmap for me. One of the names that I had mentioned was Brad Geiger. I noticed a big miss on your part, big swing and a miss, that there was no mention of a Dave Kellett on your end of things. Right into Phil Folio. Phil Folio got years and years of praise. Groundbreaking work. Phil Folio. No mention of.
No, we were. Listen, I mean, if you really want to know, I hadn't gotten to this yet. It was in my notes, of course, but. But no, David, you were somebody that everybody was watching, because you were clearly way out in front of the rest.
I'm kidding. No, Phil, you're right, though, that Phil, I hadn't thought about it, but Phil was one, even though I never had the conversation with Phil, I was sort of keeping an eye on the fact that Phil was a couple decades older than we were and had made a go of it. I said made a go of it, had made it work as an independent cartoonist, continuing to own and control his own stuff, and no one told him what to do, and he published what he wanted to publish, and it worked out great for him. And he had, a fantastic career in a lot of spaces and venues, and I also took a lesson from him, and I don't know, there's also a lot of cartoonists for whom I was appreciative of the advice that they gave me along the way, even if that was not the path I chose. Yeah. So it's worth mentioning to me all the political cartoonists who, when I were younger, said, you don't want to be a political cartoonist. Like, they literally told me, you don't. Yeah. It's like, I don't know if you had any lawyers in your life tell you, Brad, you don't want to be a lawyer. It's not what you want to do. Yeah. And so kind of like Tahid last week, we were talking about how, because, his comics are also joy-filled, like you reach a certain point where you just don't want to be angry all the time in your cartooning. Yeah. And I realized that with my editorial cartooning, and thanks to the lessons of those editorial cartoonists. And then also, I should say, I learned lessons from the syndicated cartoonists who were starting around the same time we were starting.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, it's not going as well as any of us thought it was going to go for you in terms of how newspapers are going. And that was a lesson for me. That was the roadmap of what not to do. And even that is helpful.
Well, yeah, and speaking of which, when we started to see, for example, and I know you and I have talked about this in the past, just seeing some of these guys from the Silver Age, who were Silver Age comics artists,
yes,
that would be out on GoFundMe because they need, a medical bill paid and stuff like that.
right.
When you start to see that over and over again, you realize that going down the route that they went did not work out so well.
Yeah, it was not a money. And, I think Spike Trotman said something once that I thought was really interesting, which was you see these 75 and 80-year-olds coming to Comic-Con not because they want to be there, but because they have to be there. They're desperate to sign X number of things to make a few, clams here and there because they don't have any residuals from the Marvel and DC days. And that was a huge lesson, that the thing that you think is gangbusters, like, I'm going to have a career at Marvel. No, I'll tell you what, the smarter ones were the ones that started Image. Image was a much smarter move than sticking around at Marvel. That was the better move. It
really was.
Yeah.
And that was back in the 80s. And that, I mean, again, all of these lessons, it seems like we have to keep learning and relearning the same old lessons. You can go all the way back to the golden age of comics, the guys that created Superman, Siegel and Schuster.
Yeah.
Please tell me I got both those names right.
I think, Siegel and Schuster, yeah.
I keep going Simon and Schuster, but that was a publisher.
Have you ever seen the check that they got paid for Superman?
That's my point.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, it was just like $160, $180.
Yeah, it was some ridiculously small amount for the Superman. Oh, yeah.
But you go all the way back to the golden age, and then you go to the silver age, and you keep going decade after decade. And it seems like each new wave of new cartoonists have to keep learning the same lessons over and over again. It's like signing that contract. In many cases is not smart unless you really understand what's in that contract that you're signing. And it's like, again, every time I try to bring this up in my own class of college age students, you can tell they do not want to hear it. They think that their experience is going to be different. And it's like, no, there's been generation after generation after generation that is crushed on the rocks below. To think about it before you jump.
Yeah, and that's why, like, every generation has had to learn that the most painfully wrong thing you can say in cartooning is, I don't want to know about the business. I just want to draw. Every generation has had that as an artist. I don't want to deal with the business. I just want to draw. And that, it might work for you for 5 years. It might work for you for 10 years. Eventually, it will bite you on the ass if you don't take ownership and control of your own career.
Somebody actually said that, and we were at a comic convention at the same panel discussion. We were both up on the dais. And this person said that, and I almost jumped out of my chair at them. It was back in the Zuda Comics days, if you remember Zuda Comics. And I literally almost jumped out of my chair. I said, listen, I said to him, I kind of chewed him out. I go, there's kids here. There's children here, and they think you know what you're talking about, and they're going to imprint on what you just said. I don't want to learn the business. I just want to draw comics. You can't say that in front of children. I chewed him out. I said, don't you dare say that. That's a horrible thing to say in front of young, impressionable minds.
But it's true, though. I mean, some people ask us, like, why are you and Brad so suspicious of platforms? And part of that is because we've learned the lesson of 70 years of comics where whatever the means of transmission for cartooning is, whoever controls it is the one that's in control of your career. So if you put all your eggs in that Instagram basket, if you put all your eggs in that Webtoons basket or Go Comics or whatever it is, Boom or Marvel, DC, whatever it is, whatever the format is, there's danger there unless you own and control and can steer your own path in cartooning, there's trouble to be had there, So make sure,
Yeah.
even if you do it, make sure that it's one leg under the table and not the sole leg under the table, so that if that one thing gets knocked out, you're not on GoFundMe when you're 75 or having to trot down to Denver East Comic Con when you're 80 to sign, hoping you can make $1,000 because you're desperate for cash. It's not what you want.
We've seen that time and time again, and and the story never changes.
It never changes.
The names change; they just rotate through different names, but the stories are always the same.
Mm-hmm. And if you go back in time, they had a heyday where they're like, "See, I don't need to learn about business. I'm an artist, and I'm making great money." Okay, yes, in this particular moment, you're making great money. Let's forecast where you're going to be in 30 years. How are you going to make income? How are you going to, if your hand stops working or this or that, what are the residuals that are going to continue to make it so you have a livable wage? And
that even extrapolates over to a business manager. How many people got taken advantage of by a business manager because they figured the business manager was taking care of the business? You've got to understand enough about business so you can look over the business manager's shoulder and make sure that they're on the up and up. You still got to understand all this stuff, even if you've got representation, if you've got an agent, if you've got a manager, if you've got any of these things. You still have to understand it for yourself so you can check the books.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So anyway, I'm incredibly grateful of cartoonists like Jeff Smith and Phil Folio and the Image Comics people who I never really met. I met one or two of them, but I've never really, interacted with them. But I'm grateful that they had that roadmap for owning and controlling your own thing. And I'm grateful, frankly, for a lot of our friends and peers in webcomics who I look to on a day-to-day basis, even now, to see what they're doing and how they're doing it. And even though Brad won't say it, I look to Brad for his advice. And I think Brad is a hallmark of what you should do. And I think Brad is someone we can all learn from. And I value his advice and friendship.
Oh, my God.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we've recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics. All right, Brad, our next question from patreon.com/ComicLab comes in from Susan Marks. And Susan writes...
why don't you read that?
Oh, God. The quiet abuse. All right, Susan writes, do you do each of the comic making steps every day? I've been batching my work, for example, writing all the pages for the chapter, then thumbnailing them all, then penciling them all, etc. And I'm finding that I'm getting bored with these long hauls, and I'm thinking of making the move to doing a completed page every week instead. Thanks for always being there, always helpful, and always with the funny. So Brad Geiger, since you are always with the funny, what do you recommend in this situation? Susan's been batching her work and has found that she's getting it's a little long in the tooth to do it that way.
Yeah. This question fascinated me because I've been doing it for so long, I didn't think about it anymore, but I've actually done it both ways and for two different reasons. Okay. All right. So when I was doing a daily comic strip, when I was putting out between 5 and 6 strips a week, I batched them because I could work up speed that way. In other words, I would write the entire week, then I would pencil the entire week, then I would ink and letter the entire week. I did everything as an assembly line because when I was done penciling, I might be tired penciling, but if I had a little bit of time and some brain matter left over, I could write a little bit. So I could kind of do two things at once in a sort of way of thinking. But I could do more work and get more stuff cranked out if I worked on it like an assembly line, doing all my writing, all my penciling, and so forth. When I stopped doing comics and I started doing full pages, I still write like everything in advance, or at least I plot everything in advance. And I think we talked about that a couple shows ago, where we talked about the fact that we've got everything plotted out. We might not have the scenes written, but we've got like maybe the next 2 months plotted out, and we know where it's going to go. So I do more writing in advance, but when it comes to doing the actual pages, I'll very often sit down and letter a page and then pencil the page and then ink the page, like in 1 day session or in a day and a half, split up. And the only difference is the fact that instead of doing strips, I'm doing a full page. But when you think about it, there's not a lot of difference between a week's worth of strips and a full page or a couple full pages. It's really the same amount of work. It's just that mentally it seems to work a lot better. And it would be kind of dopey for me to try to pencil like 3 pages in a row. It just seems to fit a lot better with how I work. And I don't know. I don't know what that means to you other than to say that I've done them both and they both work great. And if what you're saying is that I get bored doing it in an assembly line, then do it the other way. You're not going to hurt yourself a bit. Find the way that works best for you and then run with it. Do you agree or disagree?
Yeah, no, the way I would look at it is kind of like meal prep and meal enjoyment and dessert enjoyment, in that for me, I like Brad have done it where I batched things and wrote a whole week and then penciled a whole week and then inked a whole week and then scanned a whole week and then colored a whole week and then, that kind of thing. So I've done that in the past, and I found that I didn't enjoy it because it's eating too much broccoli without ever getting to ice cream for me. You know what I mean? It's like, I love the writing process, but for me, one of the most zen moments in my creative day is when I get to draw. So if I can work in a little bit of drawing every day, it feels like I got a little bit of ice cream, every day. Whereas, and don't get me wrong, I love the writing process too. It is genuinely fun to sit with a coffee and scratch out ideas and rework phrases and play with language. I love that too. But too much of that starts to feel like, it's all just the meat and potatoes and I'm never getting to dessert, that kind of thing. I have found, and also, as we talked about, I think it was last week, that I have become, or at least see myself becoming, more of a performative cartoonist, that I like the sort of creating in real time aspect of cartooning. And so I have found that if last week's comic goes up live and I can react to it as a writer, as a creator, not necessarily changing what I want to do, but to reinforce themes that seem to be working well and to shore up things that I didn't quite hit right, that helps my process. And for me, also, one last point, Brad, in non-batching cartoons like you, I do Drive as a full cohesive project. It usually takes me about a day to do a full Drive. I write it, I rework it, I lay out the text, I lay out the panels with the text, I draw it, and then Beth inks it, and then, believe it or not, sometimes she recolors it. Let me start again. She colors it, and then what happens is every once in a while I will re-ink or re-letter a few tiny tidbits, right? All of which, this is to say that this all took place within a day, and because it all took place in a day, I have sort of competing ideas and paths of where certain dialogue could go, depending on how the final panel looks. And now that might sound stupid, like, well, of course you're going to know how the final panel looks. But I've learned over 20 years of cartooning, what I think I'm going to draw is not always what ends up being drawn.
Right.
Sometimes the pen has a mind of its own, and I go, oh, no, it's better from this angle. It's better from bird's eye, better from worm's eye, whatever you're going to do. And you go, oh, that works better, but I need to change my dialogue now. And only in having that sort of flexibility, by having done it all in one day, does that seem to work for me.
Yeah. Well, let's go back to the Webcomics Weekly days. We used to talk about this topic quite a bit, and we name-dropped Scott at the top of the show. Scott used to say, I can't work in advance. He was doing PvP very frequently, if not almost all the time, the night before. Right. Like if Monday's comic was done Sunday night,
In fact, I would say
Tuesday.
even a lot. Sometimes it was even same day, which is perfectly fine.
Very much so. And that's used to drive me crazy. The idea of working like that, I couldn't understand how we did it. And I don't think I could.
And yet I noticed. Oh, hold on, I got to pause you because it drove you crazy. And yet you name drop him as a cartoonist that drew a map for your career. I don't want to tell you how you should feel. I'm not in the business of being a dictator.
You don't want to tell me how to feel.
But I just want to point out that the way that Scott seemed to work made you angry, and yet, Scott Kurtz, he was a real roadmap to how I should do and build my career. He was the one that was there for me. Oh.
You're reading way more into that.
I can only react to what I'm hearing, Brad.
You're hearing a bunch of stuff that didn't get said. You're hearing me and the voice in your head. Oh my God. No, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that idea did not seem like a good fit. If I were to compare where I was then and where I am now, I'm certainly not doing it the night before, but I'm a lot closer. Like, I don't have near the buffer these days that I had when I was doing comic strip work. Nowhere's near the buffer. And I honestly don't know. Like, if you said, why is that? I don't know why it is, other than I'm a different creator than I was 20 years ago. Right. And I try to get ahead. I've gotten over the last 2 weeks, I've held maybe an extra 2-day on my schedule buffer. But I also know it's going to disappear by April. It's just, I'm a different person and I can't work that way anymore. And as long as I'm hitting my own personal deadlines and I'm keeping my work going at the pace that I think it should be, at the end of the day, and I say this not only to you, but to the question asker, Susan, it doesn't matter. This is how I work. And I'm getting good work done. I'm getting work done at a good rate. It doesn't matter. And the next person comes along, they're only going to be able to work in batches. And that's going to work good for that person. Right, as long as you find what works well for you, that's the important thing.
Yeah. So, Susan, in this case, if what you're kind of looking for is dispensation to move away from the batch method for a while, then by all means, experiment and have fun with it and keep it fresh, because also what we do can sometimes after we do it for a long time feel rote in certain regards. And so whatever you can do to keep that fresh, by all means do it. In fact, I think Brad and I would both go so far as to say the way that we are doing it now is not the way we will be doing it 10 years from now. It will change again. And I think we're both okay with that because, frankly, it's a healthy way to keep it fresh for ourselves, And I think that's a lesson we learned. That's a lesson I think, Brad, we learned from one of the greatest cartoonists of our lifetime, Scott Kurtz. Don't you think that? I think Scott.
Yes, we've all got a lot to learn from Scott. Oh my God.
I don't know why I'm enjoying this bit so much. All right, well, let me move us on to our next question, Brad.
Yes.
So this comes in from Craig Russell over at patreon.com/ComicLab, and Craig writes, "Hey guys, hope you're well. My goal as a creator is to master the art of seamlessly combining character, plot, and theme to create emotionally resonant stories. Is this something you try to achieve in your own work?" I don't know why that made me laugh. I think it's the seamlessly and emotionally resonant. Is this something you try to achieve in your own work? Do you guys have any advice or tips on how I should approach this? Okay, Brad. So I asked this to you, Brad. How do you seamlessly combine character, plot, and theme to create emotionally resonant stories?
Oh, I don't at all. I'm trying to do something very different. My approach is to create a dichotomy between the pseudo-realism of narrative intention and the traditional ethos of a postmodern symbiology. Of course, that's when my own ambient exceptionalism isn't running in conflict with the subconscious id super-ego melange of proto-realistic hegemony. What about you, Dave?
Oh my God. I
What do you
take a
think?
disambiguous approach to a proto-capitalist reworking of what I think to be a neo-Marxist insight into the artist as audience method.
Yes.
No. So I, I like that we both reacted to poor Craig. I like that we both reacted to Craig's question there. That was funny.
Well, that's because here's my actual answer, and it also sounds like a smart aleck answer, but I'm serious as a heart attack. What I try to do, if you pressed me, I could not honestly tell you what it means to seamlessly combine character, plot, and theme to create an emotionally resonant story. Gun to my head, I can't tell you what those words mean, and I don't know that I care, because I'll tell you what I do try to do. I try to write a comic that somebody wants to read. Done. That's the whole thing I'm trying to do. I want to write a comic that somebody wants to read. I don't know what it means to be emotionally resonant or to be seamlessly emotionally I don't know any of that stuff. I want to write a good story. And I know that there are certain things that we can talk about in writing a good story. You know, what I tell my storytelling students all the time. You got to have a character who has a want or a need that's being blocked or obstructed or competed for, right? You've got to have a primal need in there somewhere, right? Yep. Housing, food, shelter, sex, something that's primal that's in there. And you've got to make your protagonist somebody that the readers or the audience is willing to imprint on and to identify with. There's lots of stuff that we can talk about in terms of storytelling, but these are nuts and bolts. And I honestly don't know what this question is asking. Because at the end of the day, I'm just trying to write something that somebody wants to read.
Yeah, I think I'd net out on kind of the same way. I think I will go a step further, is that if I'm being honest about it, Brad, I don't even know that at my base level, I'm trying to create something that I want people to read. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. That's my secondary, a tertiary thought, is like, oh, I hope people enjoy this thing that I created. Oh, how can I help market this thing that I created better? With Drive, especially, my overarching goal is I want to enjoy this story. I want to enjoy it. And then I want to share it and hope other people enjoy it. But if I'm writing a page and I go, oh, wow, it's a cool spaceship. Pew, pew, pew. Oh, wow, I'm really enjoying the way the emperor shot back at his ambassador. Oh, that was a fun way to say that. Oh, that was cool. Yeah. Oh, I liked this alien design. Oh, these are neat. To me, it's the 9-year-old in me going, oh, wow, rad. This is great. Oh, I get to draw this. Oh, this is fun. Woo. That kind of thing. And no, but I'm being serious though, that I think I write it for me, and then I bring it to people and go, hey, I hope you like it too. If you like it, please tell other people that might like it. And the hope is that I find enough like-minded or similarly interested people that follow the story. But and as far as artifice goes, as far as weaving in theme and tone and types of character into one story and to make it seamless. I will be honest that, sure, I try to work in themes with plot, with character. Sure, I try to do that. But if I'm being honest about it, it's 20 years of practice that's made it look okay, but I think under the hood, it's like a jalopy. It's like one of those guys trying to spin 20 plates. Like, I'm doing my best to try to keep it seamless. I don't know if it's seamless. I don't know if my characters are seamless with my theme. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess and maybe this is the Midwest in me, but when I hear stuff like that, seamlessly combining blah, 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 I think you're making this something that it's not. These are comics. These are quick, disposable entertainments. These are stuff that people read scrolling through on their phone on their way to work or during a lunch break. This is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be quick, and frankly, it's supposed to be disposable. We are not writing the great American novel here, and we hope that some of the stuff sticks around. But that's not its primary purpose. Its primary purpose is to be very momentary. And I reject, for me, and again, some of this I completely admit is my Midwest talking. I kind of reject some of this. In other words, I think instead of doing all of that, you should just focus on either my approach, which is try to write a comic that somebody wants to read, or what Dave is saying, try to write the comic that you want to read. Both of those are good. And to be fair, both of us do what the other one is talking about.
Absolutely.
There's an
Absolutely,
awful
that's true.
lot of write the comic that Brad wants to read that goes into my approach. And there's an awful lot of write the comic that people want to read that goes into Dave's approach.
Right.
It's not a one or the other deal.
Exactly. And I'm glad you clarified that, because that's true. Yes.
Yeah, but none of us is worrying about emotional resonance, because you know why? I don't care about that. I've got a story to tell, and I think when we get into it, when we start looking at storytelling like that, I think I'm going to argue that you drain a lot of the joy out of storytelling, because storytelling is also very instantaneous, very of the moment. And I don't know that you get good writing if you approach it like almost like a mathematical formula. Well, did I seamlessly incorporate my theme on this day? Well, maybe not. Was it worth reading? Did I want to read it? That's what I want to know. This isn't. Yeah. I think you're draining the joy out of storytelling, even to talk about it that way, right? And again, that just might be me.
Well, I don't know if you, Brad, if you've ever come across writers more than cartoonists, but writers who are like, I just want to be the voice of my generation. And you always want to bop them in the face. You're like, what? Yes, voice of your generation? Maybe just write. Just write first, and then, that kind of thing. It's
what makes you think you're going to be the voice of a again, Midwest? What makes me think that I should be the voice of a generation? I'm not even sure I should be the voice of me. Let alone an entire generation.
Exactly. I often joke about how little my 2 master's degrees in comics got me, but I will tell you one thing that they got me. They gave me a perspective on comics history of how many wonderful careers, absolutely amazing careers, that are forgotten about 5 years after that cartoonist dies. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I am under no illusion that I'm going to be some great voice of my generation, or that I'm going to be the great American novelist in graphic novel form. My goal is to create art that brings me joy, is fun, and that I can ideally craft the communication successfully enough, to Brad's point, that the audience loves it, right? So that's my 2 basic ideas. And also, the third one there is make a living on it. And that's not a small thing. Like, that also influences the way I do what I do, right? Because I don't have the choice right now to go Bill Watterson and paint in the forest. I don't have the independent $100 million yet. I've got to keep working. So there's going to be some eBay pieces. There's going to be some Comic-Cons that I don't want to go to. What I'm saying is, in order to make the art, I have to have the ability behind the scenes to have the money to make the art, and so it is all part of a dance. And that's why I say sometimes it is like a jalopy or a plate spinner, in that you're just trying to keep it going to tell the story.
Trying to do this.
I don't have my French beret with my legs crossed tight as I lean forward, going, "This story is going to be a seamless production of character, theme, and plot." Granted, I hope that by the time I get done with Drive, people go, "Hey, there were some really cool overarching themes you had in there about the nature of empires rising and falling, and the nature of power and how it's used." But like Brad said, I'm not setting out to write the great American novel. I'm sending out first and foremost to entertain, and usually first and foremost to entertain me.
Yeah. And go back to kind of speaking of themes, this is a theme of the show here. Nobody goes out looking for a comic to read, whether they walk into their comic shop or they're just scrolling through trying to find something that might interest them on Gumroad, for example, or Drive Through Comics. Nobody goes out looking for something to read saying, you know what I want, Dave? You know what I want? I'd like to find something that seamlessly combines character, plot, and theme to create an emotionally resonant story. Nobody says that. You know what they say? I'd like to read a science fiction story that's told with a sense of humor. That's what I want to. I want to read a romance that's got superheroes in it. I want to read something that has that. I want to read funny animals. That's what they're looking for. And by the way, I got to say this real quick. It sounds like we're taking a dump all over what you're saying. if you're saying, Craig, if you're saying that this is what it takes you to get excited about writing, doing whatever it is that all those words mean, and I still don't know what they mean. But if that's what it takes you to get excited, by God, then you do that thing. It doesn't matter whether I understand it, as long as the end product is a comic that somebody wants to read, you do that by all means. But just understand, nobody goes out looking for that. What they want is to find something that brings enjoyment to them.
I'm really glad you said that, because in the moments where we can sound small in a response, and Craig, I hope you don't feel that we were being small. Brad's right. If what it takes for you
jerks. We are jerks, though.
No, but you were kind in that. You were kind in that final sentence there, where you said, like, if what it takes for you is that, like, I don't want to do this thing unless it all cohesively makes sense and unless it all has a unifying theme. I can understand that. I get that. Like, you want it. If you're going to do the thing, you want to do it really well, and I get that. I think what Brad and I are saying is from 20 years on of trying to do this day to day is that sometimes it's more spit and baling wire putting it together and hoping that what you're doing is working in an entertaining way. And yes, if a theme gets through that entertainment, then great. But that first and foremost, it's putting together we're going to put on the show right here kind of a feeling, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then hoping to bring in a crowd and keep them entertained. So yeah, I am glad you said that, though, Brad. I think that's a good point. If it works for you, Craig, if that's the driving line for your creativity, then good, go with it.
Absolutely. So, Dave, let's wrap up this show with a real quick one, because I think we can handle this one fairly quickly. Okay. Just Call Me the Bomb wrote in, and she says, antagonists, villains, just downright assholes. How do you write them? I love writing characters, but slam into an invisible wall with villains. My partner's the same way, but he writes D&D while I write scripts. I love my protagonists, and I want a worthy villain to kill my darlings. How do you write a good villain? I ask you, Dave Kellett.
Oh, well, so I will say as a caveat that I think I am more known for, and I would describe myself more for, writing joy-filled comics, right? I think that's a fair way to describe my comics. But the times where I write a villain, like especially in Drive, my two sort of maxims on writing a villain is, in their own mind, they have to believe that what they're doing is right and or just and or the correct way to be doing things, right? That's really key for writing a villain. They have to believe that what they're doing is the, quote, right way to doing it. And these other fools don't know. They don't understand the whole picture. If they could only see what I see, then they would know that what I'm doing is right. Or these fools will never understand. Or the way that I'm doing it, someday people are going to figure out that the way I did it was the right way, and by God. So that's number one, right? And then number two,
in other words, every villain is a hero of their own story.
Yes, thank you. That's a great rephrasing of that, and in fact, more impactful. So yes, Brad, thank you. And then the second thing that I would say is, if you want to write a really effective villain, you have to make the smallest element of their motivation relatable. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Let's grab Thanos, right? Thanos from the Avengers. Okay. A terrifying possibility. He wanted to snap out half of all life in the universe. But a tiny sliver of his justification was, this is an ecological nightmare. Every sentient life form in the universe is overrunning their planet like a virus. This needs to be addressed in somehow. And so even though it is a horrifying end, a tiny part of us is like, wait, there's a little bit of that that's relatable. There's a little bit of that that makes sense.
Every time I've ever been standing in line at the grocery store, I relate to this. We don't need all these people.
Brad gets out. Every time he's at the grocery store, Brad gets out the Toys R Us gauntlet and just puts it on. He's in the back of the line, just snapping away, going, come on.
Away. We do not need all of these people. That lady right over there, expendable. Snap, snap, snap.
This guy with that shirt, what is that shirt? Snap, snap, snap. No, but what I'm getting at, though, is there's two things going on as an example with Thanos. He absolutely believes that he is the right guy, and we say it repeatedly in the movies, that he is in the right, other people just don't understand, and he is doing the thing that is correct. He's on the correct path. And the second thing is, there's a tiny part of his motivation that is relatable, and that makes truly terrifying, because then you start, if you have I don't know, I'm trying to think of some terrifying person in history, Jack the Ripper. If you wanted to write Jack the Ripper well, you could say that he's trying to remove vice from the streets of London, right? And so that could make it a tiny, tiny bit relatable, as horrifying as what he did. And what I'm saying is it makes it for an effective villain when you're writing it.
Yep. Nope. That's absolutely right. Now you've handled all the storytelling side. I'm gonna take it from the psychological side and talk about the writer now.
Good. Okay. Yeah.
Because you covered all the bases on your side. Let's talk about the writer now. And there's one sentence that I was reading that a second time, I zeroed right in on. And like I said on this show 100 times, your words give you away. Here's what I saw. I love my protagonists. Here's the problem with that. You can't love your protagonist. You've got to want to beat your protagonist up. You got to want to absolutely decimate your protagonist. You've got to be willing to cause them real pain as a writer. You cannot afford to love your protagonist. So you've got, and you're never going to be able to write a worthy villain because you're always going to be pulling your punches because you love your protagonist too much. Okay. So that's the first thing I'm going to tell you is find something to dislike about your protagonist a little bit so that when it comes time to kick them in the teeth, you can. And here's the other part, and this works hand in hand. I think you're going to get there. Just call me the bomb. I think you're going to get there eventually as you gain more confidence. Okay, because here's what you need to do to make that villain truly every bit the villain that it needs to be. That villain needs to be super powerful to the point of being invincible, to the point of being evil squared, and unbeatable. Otherwise, the victory is shallow, and you can't get to that point until you write yourself into an absolute corner as a writer, right? You've got to make that villain so unbeatable that you don't even know how they're going to get beat, right? And that takes confidence as a writer to write yourself absolutely into a corner that you have no idea how you're going to. And by the way, you will be stumped sometimes. For weeks, you'll be stumped. But as you become more confident as a writer, and that just happens with every story you write, you get a little bit more confident. As you become more confident as a writer, you're going to be more confident in writing that hero into an unwinnable situation. You're going to be more confident creating a dastardly, truly vile villain that's unbeatable. And when you do that, your storytelling is going to absolutely take off because that's when the stakes are high enough for your writing to mean something. And that's going to come as you become a more confident writer.
Right. By the way, I have nothing to add to that because it's such a good summary of that. But I will give you one other trick that I have found useful. This is a different vein in terms of writing villains. And this is not specifically helpful in writing the moment that you need to write for that scene. But imagine your villain's childhood and imagine what it took to get them there. And the reason I say that is every child, at least for a moment in their life, was loved by a parent or loved by a relative. Every child at some point giggled and did something sweet for something else. So how did they become that villain? And as you imagine that from that moment, you can sort of see the path and the choices that got them to where they landed. And it in some ways makes them more sympathetic to write because you see that the whole person didn't start off with this incredibly fatal flaw. It was a series of 10,000 small choices or choices made for them or to them that created this moment. And I find that very helpful, is to see that every villain started off as an innocent child at some point. And what was it that got him to that path? Don't you think, Brad?
So what you're saying, Dave, is that if you love your protagonist, you have to really love your villain at least as much, if not a little bit more.
Yeah, you have to love your villain.
You got to find the love.
Yeah, find their, for lack of a better phrase, humanity in their inhumanity. Find the little spark of the little kid that's still there, you know? And frankly, in order to have your protagonist go through a valid story where they get the heck beat out of them, you a little bit have to look at it like a blacksmith looks at trying to temper steel. Is that the only way to make steel harder is to temper it and to beat the heck out of it on the old anvil there, right? And so if you love your protagonist and want them to be the best version they can be, they have to go through some trials. They have to go through some shit to get to become the person that they truly can be. So in a way, it is loving them to say, like, I know you're going to go through some stuff, but at the end of it, you're going to be better, stronger, kinder, more loving, whatever it is. And that sometimes is helpful when you don't want to, kill your darlings, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'm going to come back to confidence. The more confidence that you have, I think the more you're going to be comfortable doing this. Some of this just comes with practice. I know that I'm still trying to get better about it. In fact, if you looked at my sketchbook right now, in the story I'm writing this very moment, I've got a note to myself to remember to make him worse. Like I've introduced him and I've got a note for the next couple swings. Don't forget, you've got to take this guy that just came up. You got to make him worse. He's not bad enough yet. You got to make him worse. I'm still struggling with that. Right. There's a part of me that doesn't want to write myself into a corner for fear of what it's going to do. So this is a road that we're all on, but the good news is we're all on it together, and we can help ourselves out week after week as we're trying to get better at this. Because goodness knows it ain't always easy. And as you continue down that road, you'll know that you can listen to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my friend Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my friend, the better than Scott Kurtz, Dave Kellett, co-director. There, do you feel better now?
A single tear rolling down my cheek. Thanks, Dad. He said he loved me finally after all these years. Dad said he loved me.
My friend, the wonderful Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and the cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions. You can check him out over at www.woodsong.media. And don't forget our sponsor for this show, Bonjoro. You can check them out at bonjoro.com. It's a video app you send to people who are getting involved in your comics, whether it's buying original art or joining your Patreon. You send them a personal thank you greeting through Bonjoro. And you can try it out for 14 days and then use ComicLab April to get 20% off the rest of your life. And if you love ComicLab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode like this one. Dave, this comes in from MK via Twitter, who says ComicLab podcasts Comic Studs. Brad Geiger and Dave Kellett's year-long review of the Wacom One led to another purchase. Now my drawing at cafes dream like a cool person can be realized. One of the best professional purchases of the year. Hey, that's great. That's great. Dave, that's fantastic. Comic Studs. We've been called the Comics Dads. We've been called the Comics Uncles. I think Comic Studs is one we should keep. I gotta say, I don't mind the other ones. Your policy of keeping your photo off the internet has worked. It has finally paid off, my friend. Yeah. And so I'm going to say ComicLab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/ComicLab. So we will go ahead and say that twice. Please join us over at patreon.com/ComicLab. Okay, Brad, our next question from patreon.com/ComicLab. Patron Susan Marks writes in, Brad and Dave, do you each of... Let me start that again. I'm so sorry, Matt. All right, Brad, our next question from patreon.com/ComicLab comes in from Susan Marks, and Susan writes, do you do each of the comic making... Oh, I see. She's asking that. Sorry, I was reading... I apologize. I'm starting again, Matt. Jeez Louise. Okay. Okay, Brad, our next question comes in over at patreon.com/ComicLab from... God bless I'm starting again. Sorry, Matt. God, I'm sorry. All right. Isn't it funny how once we get going, who cares? But it's always starting that's the tricky part.
Starting
Anyway.
is tough. Starting is tough.
All right.